I'm going to do a presentation today. Let me just get the presentation up. Thank you. So what I want to do today is to set the scene and talk a little bit about the global landscape in which we have to do our policy formulation, and discuss what is South Africa's biggest problem, give a policy overview from the department side on 4IR, with a focus on innovation today. And the question that I would like to discuss today is how can we accelerate industrialization through innovation. So if we look at the global perspective, we see that, as you all know, the global economy has slowed down tremendously. Not only are we facing a health crisis, but we also, all the countries are facing economic crisis as well. We see that debt levels have risen sharply, which suggests that there's a looming financial crisis as well. And we see that the consequences are more severe for developing countries and least developed countries. With COVID-19 pandemic, the future has been brought forward. And we always talked about the digital economy as something of the future. But now the digital economy and the future of jobs have arrived. We have seen that the World Economic Forum reaffirmed in the Great Jobs Reset Summit in October that the demand for skills outweighs the supply of skills in the digital economy. And the advanced production and future manufacturing network, the global network, focus on the resilience and sustainability of factories. So if we look at manufacturing in detail, we see that the manufacturing, the designing of manufacturing and supply systems are focused on adapting and redesigning systems for resilience, looking at lessons learned from the crisis and key capabilities required to increase resilience and enable innovation in the new normal. On discussion on the agenda for global manufacturing is also accelerating new collaborations for sustainable manufacturing systems. Challenges facing the modern manufacturing ecosystem are being discussed, as well as new opportunities for collaboration to accelerate the deployment of advanced technologies, looking at inclusive and sustainable manufacturing systems. South Africa's biggest problem, and that's my personal view, is if we look at the OECD study done recently now in 2020, over a period of 60 years, looking at unemployment for countries and also determining the OECD countries' average, we see that unemployment was between 0 and about 12%. Of course, with the pandemic in 2020, increased significantly to more than 15%. But if we look at South Africa, this is South Africa over the past 20 years, and we can see what's happening to the unemployment rate, which I think is the biggest problem that we have to address in our economic recovery plan. Looking at the department's digital industrial policy ecosystem, we have identified 6 drivers of smart factories. So if we talk about smart factories, critical manufacturing processes are very important and also need guaranteed connectivity. According to Ericsson's forecast for 2020, there's about 190 million 5G subscriptions, or it will be by the end of 2020. And that will increase to about 2.8 billion by 2025. So we see that many industrial enterprises are defining 5G as their primary connectivity platform. So the digital economy is becoming more and more important for future factories. And the 6 items that we've identified that are the drivers for smart factories are, number 1 is future employment skills and jobs. And we see that work from home is becoming more and more important, and the connectivity to be able to work from home. We also see that there's a future borderless work regime where your employers will not necessarily be close to your operations. And secondly, advanced industrial production processes are important. Technology, everybody is talking about technology and the importance of technology. We want to focus on technological capabilities and technology-led industrialization. We see that there's a massive increase in the industrial connections. In 2019, connections increased with more than 100 million, which is a trend that we are following. Ultimately, we want systems to reach new levels of productivity, security, and safety by employing new technologies. Third is industrial innovations and intellectual property, which we will focus on today, and I will talk about that more later. Fourthly, industrial productivity and regional integration. Our department developed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, and we would like to bring Africa into our industrial production value chains. Competitiveness is also very important. We see that 5G is a key enabler for industrial competitiveness, and everybody is moving to 5G. Data is very important, and it's a highly priced competitive asset that we can't ignore. Environmental solutions are important. We want to look at low CO2 production and participate in industrial ecology, so in the circular economy and waste management and so on. Lastly, logistics and freight services is very important, and we see that as complexity of networking grows for manufacturers, the communication infrastructure is outsourced, and we look at smart mobility. I think what's important here is also to look at interoperability, where systems can connect and systems can speak to each other. So those are the 6 drivers for our policy on smart factories. But we have identified 3 items that will enable us to focus on these 6 items. The first one is legal and regulatory frameworks, which we can't ignore. We want to look at the stumbling blocks, take that out of the way for us to move forward, and we want to address red tape. So we've seen with this COVID-19 that it's so important to have a smooth regulatory certification processes in order to obtain products and distribute products. Secondly, institutional capacity and policy coherence is important. It's important that government departments align these strategies and don't work against each other so that companies are actually feeling the negative side of policies not being aligned. Also, with institutional capacity, we look at public-private partnerships. Our international stakeholders are very important. We've seen that working with chambers of commerce is very important, as well as, for example, we had SA EU dialogue facility where we discussed issues of 4IR challenges and opportunities, which is to the benefit of contributing to our policy. Also, lessons learned that we can take from developed countries. And lastly, on partnerships, I also want to mention the role of academic institutions. We've seen with our SA-EU partnership the role that academic institutions play in the industrial ecosystem is very important, and benefits of research can be utilized in industry. Lastly, last enabler is the digitalization of industry, which is very important. We think that dedicated networks are needed for industrial connectivity, so that you can retain control of network resource allocations, and you can ensure critical data remains on site. Industry digitalization must set requirements and driving the demand for dedicated networks that are important, and the importance of data management and data storage is also included in this enabler. So in a nutshell, this is the policy ecosystem that we foresee for the digital industrial strategy and policy. So today we are going to focus on industrial innovations. According to the ministerial directive, we would like today to test the extent to which the national system of innovation support the country's industrialization efforts, in particular the manufacturing sector. And our purpose is to align our policy, our digital industrial policy that I explained now with industry needs. And to what extent does industrial innovation support the manufacturing sector, and how can that accelerate industrialization through the national system of innovation? We also want to look at next steps to unlock the national system of innovation for industrial innovations, designs and product development. And that will also include the role and mechanisms that it will play in our economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Looking at a national system of innovation, we've based this on an ideal national system of innovation, which is quite complex, but we see here that this is the higher education for post-school education and training, which will include universities, programs at universities, TVET colleges. So it's R&D and innovation happening in that space. Secondly, the government space or the public sector, where that includes regulatory functions, standards, accreditation, there's tech stations and other programs presented by the Department of Science and Innovation into the National System of Innovation. Then lastly, the area that most of you are in is in the business space of R&D, where we look at the world system of innovation, including venture capital, financial programs that are available to R&D and innovation. So this is quite a complex system, and that's what we would like to investigate, to see that how does the business area relate to the public sector and the higher education space, and how can we connect the different areas so that it forms a better system of innovation. Just a few statistics. We look at patents, and we see the 4 areas where the most patents were registered at CIPC. This is according to the STI indicators report for 2020. I can make the report available, or it's available electronically on the website. Of concern is actually, you will see on the left-hand side at the bottom, the patents that were granted in 2017, the residents versus the non-residents. So the non-residents are much higher. On firm level, we look at innovation, and the important indicators that we investigated were information that were needed for innovation, and the access to information. For the service sector enterprises, 11% of government and public research institutions made information available to enterprises, or that's the percentage information that were accessed. And for the industrial sector, of concern is only 1% of information that were accessed. And I think this is an important area that we can improve on. We also want to look at the integrity of information and how can we from government side improve the information that's needed at firm level to contribute to innovations. A few numbers on R&D expenditure. So you will see that the business sector spent the most on R&D, secondly higher education, and then science councils. The total spending on R&D, I've got the numbers here. So the total spend for 17-18 were about 38 billion rand, of which the business sector spent 15.8 billion rand on R&D. And the second highest is higher education, which includes now universities, spent 13 billion in 17-18 on R&D. We also have a target that was included in the medium-term strategic framework of 1.5% of total R&D spent as a percentage of GDP. In 2016-17, we spent about 0.8%, and so there's a lot of room for improvement to increase our R&D spending. So the last slide is on our policy objectives. What we want to look at in terms of innovation and industrialization is to identify challenges and opportunities that the national system of innovation can offer to the manufacturing sector. And we've identified 4 focus areas. The first one is industrial innovations for small business. The second one, industrial innovations in 4IR tech applications. So that's including the 5G connectivity and dedicated network systems that I talked about earlier. Thirdly, we want to look at the relationship between skills, knowledge, and abilities in the education system, and how does that relate to industrial innovations. And lastly, industrial innovations in production systems. What are the innovations being brought in into the production systems, control systems, things like predictive maintenance systems, the digital twin, and so on. What role can innovation play? And how do we incorporate that to support the national system of innovation? So the 2 areas that we identified then specifically in terms of the above is to look also at the response to COVID-19 with emphasis on solutions for supply chain disruptions and delivery of essential health goods and services, which can form part of the economic recovery plan. Then lastly, what role and contributions can the state present, including key institutions like the academic institutions that I referred to, that are playing a leading role in the national system of innovation, and how can we advance then industrialization through innovation. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.